have you done?
I'm sorry, madam. I'll clean it immediately.
You'll clean every piece yourself, and if I find even a speck of dust, you remove from this house.
The vase hit the marble floor and exploded into 100 glittering pieces. And in that single violent second, everything Ji-hoon Kang thought he knew about his fiancée began to unravel. Hey, lovelies. If you're new here, welcome to the family. If you love billionaire stories, family dramas, emotional stories, unexpected twists, and powerful life lessons like this one, you're in the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Now grab your favorite snack, get comfortable, and let's jump straight into today's story. What have you done? Ada Okafor's voice cracked through the grand hallway of the Kang mansion like a whip, sharp enough to make two maids flinch by the staircase. She didn't look at the elderly woman kneeling among the shattered porcelain. She didn't ask if she was hurt. Her eyes were fixed only on the mess, on the antique that had cost more than most people's houses. "I'm sorry, madam," the old maid whispered, her hands trembling as she gathered the broken shards. "I'll clean it immediately." "You'll clean every piece yourself," Ada snapped, stepping back so her heels wouldn't touch the debris. "And if I find even a speck of dust left behind, I will have you removed from this house before the sun sets. Do you understand me?" The maid, known to the staff only as Mrs. Maggie, lowered her head. "Yes, madam." What Ada Okafor did not know, what no one in that mansion except Ji-hoon and the head housekeeper knew, was that the trembling old woman on the floor was not a servant at all. She was Sun-hee Kang, founder of the Kang Empire, one of the wealthiest women in South Korea, and she was testing the woman her son planned to marry. It had started 3 weeks earlier, at a quiet family dinner where laughter filled the dining room and Ada charmed every guest with her easy smile. She was beautiful. She was graceful. She spoke Korean with careful respect and complimented every dish Sun-hee had personally selected. Anyone watching would have called her the perfect bride. But Sun-hee had lived 71 years, built an empire from nothing, and buried a husband who had once looked at her with the same devotion Ji-hoon now gave Ada. She had learned, painfully, that charm could be rehearsed. That kindness performed for an audience meant nothing at all. That night, after the guests left, she found her son in his study, loosening his tie, humming to himself. "Ji-hoon," she said, standing in the doorway. "Come, sit with me." He smiled and set his tie on the desk. "Mother, if this is about Ada again." "It is." He sighed, but he sat anyway because he always did for her. "She's wonderful. You said so yourself at dinner." "I said she was polished," Sun-hee corrected gently. "Polished and wonderful are not the same thing, my son. A stone can be polished by 100 hands and still be hollow inside." Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. "You don't trust her because she's not Korean, because she comes from Lagos and not Gangnam." "That is not fair," Sun-hee said, her voice steady but wounded. "I do not care where a woman is born. I care what is inside her heart when no one is watching. Your father built this company by knowing which men would stab him in the back the moment his eyes closed. I am only asking to know the same about the woman who will hold your name, and your children, and everything we built." "She loves me." "Then," Sun-hee said quietly, rising from her chair, "she has nothing to be afraid of." She left the room before he could argue further. That same night, she called her most trusted housekeeper, a woman named Yunya who had served the family for 30 years. "I need you to help me disappear," Sun-hee told her. Yunya's eyes widened. "Madam." "Tomorrow I will not be Sun-hee Kang. I will be Mrs. Maggie, a new maid hired to help prepare for the engagement celebration. No one outside this room will know. Not the staff, not the guests, not even Ji-hoon's driver. And your son. He will know. He must, for my safety and for the plan to work. But he will not interfere. I need to see Ada when she believes no one important is watching." By morning, the transformation was complete. Gray wig, thick glasses, a plain uniform 2 sizes too large, and shoes with soles worn thin from a decade of use borrowed from the mansion's costume archive. Sun-hee Kang, billionaire, vanished. Mrs. Maggie, maid, arrived instead, carrying a mop bucket and a heart full of quiet determination. The mansion buzzed with preparation for the engagement celebration. Florists arranged imported orchids along the grand staircase. Chefs argued over menu orders in the kitchen. And into the middle of it all walked Ada, radiant in a fitted cream dress, greeting the household staff with a smile so warm it could have melted stone. "Good morning, everyone," she called out, sweeping into the foyer. "Doesn't the mansion look beautiful today?" The staff murmured their agreement. Ji-hoon appeared at the top of the stairs, and Ada's face lit up even brighter. She rushed to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I missed you," she said, kissing his cheek. "I could barely sleep thinking about tonight." "Me too," Ji-hoon said, laughing as he spun her once. "Everyone's going to see how perfect you are for this family." Watching from the far end of the hallway, mop in hand, Mrs. Maggie observed the scene with careful eyes. Perfect, she thought. Everything about her is perfect. That is exactly what worries me. Ada noticed the freshly mopped floor gleaming beneath her heels, and without hesitation walked straight across it. Water splashed. Streaks marred the clean marble. She turned to Mrs. Maggie. "I'll need this cleaned again before the guests arrive." "Yes, madam," Mrs. Maggie said, bowing her head. No apology. No acknowledgement that a woman twice her age had spent 20 minutes on her knees for nothing. Just a command, delivered as easily as one might order coffee. Ji-hoon didn't notice. He was already checking his phone, distracted by a call from the caterers. And that, Mrs. Maggie realized, was precisely the point. Whenever his eyes were elsewhere, a different woman emerged from beneath Ada's polished surface. Throughout the day, the pattern repeated itself with cruel consistency. The moment Ji-hoon stepped into a room, Ada transformed, soft laughter, gentle touches, praise for the staff loud enough for him to hear. The instant he stepped out, her voice hardened. "This soup is cold," she snapped at the head chef during lunch preparations, though Ji-hoon had left only seconds before. "Do you expect me to serve this to ambassadors tonight? Remake it, now." "Yes, madam," the chef said, swallowing his frustration. In the garden, she criticized the elderly gardener, Mr. Choi, for trimming the roses too slowly. Even though he had tended those same roses for 11 years, with a gentleness that made them the envy of every estate in Seoul. "I don't care how long you've worked here," Ada told him, arms crossed. "If the roses aren't perfect by sunset, I'll have someone else finish the job." Mr. Choi said nothing. He simply nodded and returned to his clippers, his weathered hands trembling slightly, not from age, but from the sting of being spoken to like he was nothing. Later, while watering the hydrangeas near the servants' entrance, he found Mrs. Maggie resting on a bench, catching her breath. "You've only worked here a few days," he said, sitting beside her, "but I think you've already learned more about this house than most of us who have been here for years." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Maggie asked, though she already suspected his answer. "I've watched young Master Ji-hoon grow up," Mr. Choi said, his eyes distant with memory. "I remember when he was small, running through that garden, asking me the names of every flower. He has a good heart. He deserves someone who sees his heart, not his fortune." "What makes you so certain she doesn't?" Mrs. Maggie asked carefully. Mr. Choi sighed, the sound heavy with years of quiet observation. "Because in 11 years, I have learned to read people by how they treat gardeners and drivers and maids. Miss Ada smiles at the master. She smiles at the cameras. She never greets those who cannot help her climb higher. Not once." Mrs. Maggie folded her hands in her lap, saying nothing, though inside, her heart ached with the confirmation of everything she feared. That afternoon, she decided to test the limits further. Carrying a heavy basket of freshly laundered linens down the east corridor, she allowed her knees to buckle. She collapsed to the floor with a soft cry, linens scattering around her. Chaos erupted instantly. The cooks abandoned their stations and rushed to her side. 2 gardeners sprinted in from outside, dirt still on their hands. Even the head of security, a broad-shouldered man named Officer Han, knelt beside her, checking her pulse with genuine concern. "Someone call for water," he shouted. "Is she breathing normally? Mrs. Maggie, can you hear me?" Ada, who had been descending the staircase at that exact moment, paused. She glanced at the commotion, taking in the scene, the old maid on the floor, the staff gathered anxiously around her. She didn't move closer. She didn't ask if help had been called. Instead, she turned to the nearest housekeeper and asked, in a voice utterly untouched by concern, "Is dinner still on schedule? I don't want tonight ruined because of this." The words landed in the hallway like a slap. Even the staff, accustomed to swallowing their opinions, exchanged uneasy glances. From the floor, still playing weak, Mrs. Maggie watched Ada's heels click away down the corridor without a single backward glance. Her answer, she thought, is becoming very clear. That evening, as preparations for the following week's engagement party intensified, Mrs. Maggie set her final trap. She found Ada alone in the sitting room, arranging flowers for the following morning's photo shoot. "Madam," Mrs. Maggie said softly, wringing her hands with practiced anxiety, "may I speak with you, privately?" Ada glanced up, mildly irritated by the interruption. "What is it?" "I overheard the housekeeper," Mrs. Maggie said, letting her voice tremble. "She said the family plans to replace me after the wedding. New staff, younger hands. I've worked in this house for so little time, but I have nowhere else to go. If I lose this job, I won't survive the winter." She let a tear slide down her weathered cheek, a performance 40 years in the making, honed from decades of negotiating with world leaders who never suspected the woman across the table could act just as convincingly as she could command. Ada's expression shifted, not to sympathy, but to calculation. She studied the old woman for a long moment before setting down her flowers. "You want my help," Ada said slowly. "Please, madam, anything. I'll do anything you need." A slow smile crept across Ada's face, the same smile that charmed ambassadors and softened Ji-hoon's heart, now twisted into something colder. "Anything," Ada repeated. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a thick envelope, setting it on the table between them. Even without opening it, Mrs. Maggie could tell it was stuffed with cash. "I can make sure you keep your position," Ada said. "I can make sure you're paid more than you've ever seen in your life, but you'll help me in return." "How, madam?" Ada leaned closer, lowering her voice to barely a whisper. "I want copies of Ji-hoon's confidential business files, contracts, shareholder documents, anything from his private office. And I want to know everything his mother says about me when I'm not in the room. Every word, every whisper." Mrs. Maggie's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the devastating confirmation of everything she had suspected. Hidden beneath the fabric of her apron, sewn in that very morning by Yoonya's careful hands, a small recording device captured every syllable. "I understand, madam," Mrs. Maggie said, bowing her head to hide the fire building behind her eyes. "I'll do everything you ask." That night, long after the mansion fell quiet, Mrs. Maggie slipped into Ji-hoon's private study, still in her maid's uniform, and placed a small device on his desk. "Listen to this," she said, her voice suddenly different, steadier, older, carrying an authority no maid should possess. Ji-hoon frowned, confused by the shift in her tone. "Mrs. Maggie, what?" "Listen," she said again and pressed play. Ada's voice filled the room, cold and calculating, asking for confidential files, asking to spy on his own mother. Ji-hoon's face drained of color. "This is fake," he said, shaking his head. "This has to be edited. Ada would never." "Watch the security footage from this afternoon, then," Mrs. Maggie said gently. "Watch what she said when I collapsed in the hallway. Watch what she did to Mr. Choi in the garden. Watch how she speaks to every person in this house who cannot help her career or her reputation." Reluctantly, hands trembling, Ji-hoon opened his laptop and pulled up the mansion's security system. Clip after clip played across the screen. Ada snapping at the chef. Ada humiliating Mrs. Maggie over the broken vase. Ada walking away from a collapsed elderly woman to ask about dinner reservations. Ada offering bribes in exchange for corporate espionage against his own family. By the final clip, Ji-hoon's hands were shaking too badly to hold his phone. He set it down and pressed his palms against his eyes. "I don't understand," he whispered. "The woman I know, she's warm, she's kind. She held my hand at my father's grave and cried with me." "She is many women," Mrs. Maggie said quietly, and then slowly. She reached up and removed her glasses, then her gray wig, revealing the face beneath, a face he had known his entire life. Ji-hoon stared, speechless, as his mother stood before him in a servant's uniform. "Mother," his voice cracked, this whole time it was you." "I wasn't trying to destroy your happiness," Sun-hee said, crossing the room to place a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I was trying to protect it. I know this hurts, my son. I know how much you loved her. But I needed you to see the truth before your name, your children, and everything your father and I built were placed into her hands." Ji-hoon sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the recordings still glowing on his laptop screen. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What do I do now?" "Tomorrow night," Sun-hee said, "at the engagement party. Let her stand in front of everyone she has tried to impress. Let her see exactly who has been watching her all along." The following evening, the grand ballroom of the Kang estate glittered with crystal chandeliers and imported flowers, filled with celebrities, executives, diplomats, and international guests who had traveled from 3 continents to witness the announcement of the wedding date. Cameras flashed. Champagne flowed. Ada stood beside Ji-hoon in a stunning emerald gown, glowing under the attention, whispering to him about the life they would build together. "I can't wait to be your wife," she murmured, squeezing his hand. "I've dreamed of this moment since the day we met." Ji-hoon said nothing. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the entrance of the ballroom. Then the doors opened. Mrs. Maggie walked in, still dressed in her maid's uniform, moving with slow, deliberate steps across the polished floor. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Guests turned, confused, uncertain why a servant would interrupt such an important celebration. Ada's smile faltered. "Who let the maid in here?" she demanded, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Someone remove her immediately." Security began moving toward the stage. Ji-hoon raised his hand, silencing the room. "Let her speak," he said, his voice carrying across the stunned crowd. Ada turned to him, panic flickering behind her eyes. "Ji-hoon, what is this? Why would you allow?" Mrs. Maggie reached the center of the room and, without a word, removed the gray wig from her head. Then the thick glasses. Gasps erupted throughout the ballroom as the transformation revealed the true face beneath. That's Sun-hee Kang," someone whispered near the back. "The founder of the Kang Empire," another voice gasped. "She's been the maid this entire time." Ada's face went white. Her knees nearly buckled beneath her, and she gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. "I wanted to know," Sun-hee said, her voice steady and commanding, filling every corner of the silent ballroom, "who my son was truly marrying. Not the woman who smiles for cameras, not the woman who charms dinner guests. I wanted to know who she becomes when she believes no one important is watching." She lifted a small remote and pressed a button. A large screen behind the stage flickered to life, playing every recording, every insult hurled at the staff, every threat against Mrs. Maggie's job, the bribery attempt, the demand for stolen corporate secrets, the moment Ada walked past a collapsed elderly woman to ask about dinner reservations. The ballroom fell into stunned, horrified silence. Ada burst into tears, her carefully constructed composure shattering in front of hundreds of witnesses. "Ji-hoon, please," she begged, reaching for his hands. "I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you. Please, you have to believe me." Ji-hoon looked at her, his eyes glassy with a grief that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with heartbreak. "I loved the woman you pretended to be," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "I never even met the woman you truly are." He slid the engagement ring from her finger and placed it gently on the table between them. Ada sobbed, reaching for him one final time, but he stepped back, and security moved forward to escort her from the ballroom. At the doors, she turned for one last look, searching his face for any trace of forgiveness. He didn't follow. He didn't call her name. He simply stood beside his mother as the doors closed behind her. In the weeks that followed, Sun-hee Kang personally rewarded every member of the staff who had shown compassion and integrity during the test. Mr. Choi, the loyal gardener, received recognition for his decades of faithful service, along with a heartfelt letter from the family thanking him for his honesty. Officer Han, who had rushed to Mrs. Maggie's side without hesitation, was promoted. And the maid's uniform Sun-hee had worn throughout the disguise was placed inside a glass display case in the mansion's east hallway, a plaque mounted beneath it that read, "Respect is the only wealth that never loses its value. Treat every person with dignity, because you never know who is watching or who may one day change your life." Months passed. Ji-hoon slowly rebuilt himself, spending more time at his mother's side, learning the parts of the company she had spent decades mastering. One evening, they attended a charity gala supporting African international students studying in Seoul. Among the volunteers weaving through the crowd, refilling drinks and guiding elderly donors to their seats, Ji-hoon noticed a young Nigerian woman treating everyone with the exact same warmth. Donors and janitors alike, ambassadors and servers alike, without a hint of difference in her kindness. Sun-hee, standing beside her son, watched the same scene unfold and smiled quietly to herself. This time, she thought, I won't need a disguise to know the truth. And that's where today's story comes to an end. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. We truly appreciate every single one of you who watches, comments, likes, and shares these stories. It means more than you know. If this story reminded you that kindness should never depend on a person's status or appearance, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs this message today. And before you go, tell us in the comments, do you think Sun-hee's secret test was justified, or should she have trusted her son's choice from the beginning? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to watch our next heartwarming and unforgettable story. Until next time, stay kind, stay humble, and remember, the way you treat people when no one is watching says more about your character than words ever could. See you in the next story.